week, wasn't it? It began with great drama. The German Chancellor, a phone call with the British Prime Minister, where she suggested that a part of the United Kingdom, namely Northern Ireland, would not be allowed to leave the customs union, and that Dublin should have a veto over Northern Ireland's future. Now, as you can imagine, the idea of a German Chancellor saying what should happen to British territory did not go down well in Downing Street or indeed with the rest of the country. And you'd have thought for all the world that the deal, Boris's deal, was dead. And then a meeting towards the end of the week up on the Wirral with the Irish Taoiseach, and suddenly we're back in negotiations. Now, I have to say, I get worried about this. It keeps being presented and talked about as a deal. A deal is where you and I shake hands and agree to do something. This is not a deal. This is a new EU treaty. Mrs May signed us up to it. She put it to the House of Commons 3 times. It didn't go through. Now Boris wants to amend it. He wants to amend the backstop, and yes, he also wants some declarations about us leaving the customs union and leaving regulatory alignment by the end of the transition period, which will end either in 2021 or 2022 or who knows when in the future. So where are we with this? Look, I don't think there's a cat's chance in hell of the European Union agreeing that we can be completely free of single market rules or the customs union. I think there will be some tinkering around with the Irish backstop, perhaps producing a solution so complex that nobody will ever understand it. But we're being urged, not just by the Prime Minister, but now by Jacob Rees-Mogg, who wrote him a Sunday Telegraph and gave an interview yesterday to Sky News. And I've never seen Jacob looking so disconsolate, so miserable. He looked like he was attending a funeral. It was clear to me that what he was saying he didn't actually believe in. Compromise. That's the word on the street at the moment. Well, I suppose you could say that Boris Johnson and Jacob Rees-Mogg have shown already their ability to compromise. After all, when Mrs May brought that awful withdrawal agreement to the House of Commons, on the first 2 occasions, both Boris Johnson and Jacob Rees-Mogg voted against it. In fact, they said it would lead to us being a vassal state, a slave state. It was a disaster for our democracy. Then on the 3rd time that it came back to the Commons, they voted for it. Now they're telling us, Jacob's telling us, trust the Prime Minister, he's a Brexiteer, and please support whatever he does. And there are many other newspapers saying the same. We haven't seen the detail, we haven't seen the content. And what we do know is the French and Germans have met already to talk about it. What we do know is this will be discussed on Thursday and Friday of this week, ahead of the first sitting of the Commons on a Saturday for nearly 40 years. My guess is that Boris Johnson is so desperate to get Brexit done, to quote him, and the theme for the Tory party conference, that he will put something to the House of Commons on Saturday. All I can say is this new EU treaty, unless it shows clearly we will be completely out of the single market, of the customs union, taking back our territorial fishing waters, and not under the influence of the European Court of Justice. Unless it does those things, it is not Brexit. And my fear is MPs are being told, sign up for this and it'll be Brexit. But it won't. It'll be Brexit in name only. It will lead to years of acrimony. And far from ending this debate, it perhaps in many ways will make our relationship with Brussels even more bitter, even more difficult than it's been over the course of the last 3 years. So this is the biggest week since the date of that referendum back on June 23rd, 2016. And there's one other factor here, not just this new treaty, but I can see that there are many now lining up to try and impose a second referendum. Now, we've heard this before, but here's what they're looking to do. What they're looking to do is to make the new EU treaty, the withdrawal agreement, conditional on a referendum. And what Keir Starmer and the others want is they want us to have a referendum where the choice is remain against the new treaty. If it comes to that, there are 2 big things to say. The first is that our democracy will have been totally and utterly traduced, not just because we're being asked to vote again on something we were assured and told would be implemented, but because there would not be a proper leave option on the ballot paper. And I think, to be honest with you, if we got to that point, I think Remain would probably win, because it's impossible to explain with this new treaty actually where we're going to be in 2, 3, 4 years' time, because the whole thing is conditional on the good faith of the European Union, and I would argue they haven't shown much of that to date. It would be the worst of all worlds. I have to say, if we faced a referendum that was Remain against effectively Mrs May's deal, Mrs May's pig, with some lipstick on it, I'm not even sure that I could campaign in that referendum. That's how strongly I feel that this is the wrong thing to do. Better, I would suggest to the Prime Minister, to hold your nerve at this summit, and if necessary, sit it out, accept the extension that's been forced upon you by the Benn Act, even though you've told everybody we're leaving on the 31st of October, do or die, come what may. And I know, I get it. You've marched the army up to the top of the hill. You wanted to deliver, but better to wait and argue it out for a clean break Brexit at the next general election, which can't be delayed forever, than it is to, frankly, not just sell out, but kick the can down the road and lead to years and years of misery. Now, something came out of the meeting at the Elysee last night between the German Chancellor and the French President that is hugely significant. Mrs Merkal said, with the United Kingdom leaving the European Union, they become a potential competitor along the lines of the United States and China. Just think about that for a moment. We become a potential competitor. I mean, she's saying that basically with fear in her voice. And that is what I want us to be. The European single market, the customs union, all of these things keep us completely bound within the European rulebook, limit our ability to make our own friends, our own deals, our own trade deals around the rest of the world. The one thing the enemy, maybe that sounds unfair to talk about France and Germany and the European Union, but there are certainly our opponents in these negotiations. The one thing the enemy fear is us breaking free with a clean break Brexit, because they know we'd have the ability to become competitive, to be richer and more successful than they are. And the fact that so many of our idiots in Parliament are career politicians, most of whom have never ever worked in the real world, never run a company, never bought and sold goods or traded them around the world, the fact they're all saying this would be a catastrophe. They're doing the bidding of a few giant multinational businesses. They're doing the bidding of Berlin, indeed of Paris and of Brussels. In fact, it would be the great liberation. There's a massive, massive opportunity here. And even if we're not able to grab this between now and the 31st of October, I repeat the point, at some moment before very long, there is going to be a general election. This will be the opportunity to give the British people a clear vision of what we see our future to be. And you know something? If Boris Johnson was able to find the courage to do it, we would be able to work with him and he'd win a big majority. So I think, sometimes it is darkest before dawn. It does look bleak as we look ahead to this week and we face perhaps the prospect of a second referendum. I'll cross my fingers that doesn't happen. These things, of course, are outside all of our control. But either way, all I can tell you is whatever Parliament does to us, I'm here and I will fight back against them. And in the end, be confident we are going to win this, however difficult it may look sometimes.